welcome to Taking It to the Streets. I'm your host, Andy Goldman from sunny St. Pete, Florida. This is the show where we take it to the streets, knowing if we don't, the streets will take it to us.
Welcome to Taking It to the Streets. It's Andy Goldman. Our old friend Rich Beem joins us. Of course, this show is brought to you by Wrightwood Medical, www.wrightwoodmedical.com. 773-848-7100 is the number to reach out to Wrightwood Medical directly. Before we get on with Rich, we get on with the upcoming tour stop this weekend in Dallas. We need to talk about the piece that's going to be on after Rich. It will be with Kerry Thomas. Kerry is the guy that we had on a year ago that does all of the herd dynamics, the sensory stuff as it relates to the Kentucky Derby. So you're either that group that thinks he's a palm reader and that stuff doesn't really exist, or you're the person that says, you know what, that's another piece that I add to the puzzle of my handicapping. And I do see the logic. We never will see a 20-horse field in American racing for the entire year, except for the Derby. There is a herd dynamic piece to it, a sensory piece to it, as he would put it, competitive edge piece, as he would put it. So again, stay tuned. Kerry is coming up with no delay. The great Rich Beem. Beemer, you have truly mopped the floor with me of late, bro. I mean, this is ugly, to the point where we had to take 2 takes of this podcast to redo the math.
Well, listen, if that guy could whisper horses, then somehow I can just pull names out of my hat, and pretty much they're spot on at the moment. So, what can I say? I'm en fuego right now. But listen, I've also picked a couple of guys, just between me and a buddy, and no money exchange, but just have for a beer or something like that. And sometimes it was like, oh my God, I picked them, and they would just lay an egg. And that's just the nature of the game, when it comes to trying to figure out who, when you have a 156-man field like we have this week again, Andy, trying to handicap that is, I think, a hell of a lot harder than doing a 20-horse race. And I'd love to visit with some more off camera about what that mentality is with the guy that you're talking about, because I mean, that is a very cool thing that he can do, because you got to look and see who runs well in packs, but who's got the ability to really sprint when it matters the most. And again, that's why you've got guys like Scotty Scheffler, Roy McIlroy, Colin Morikawa, who Justin Thomas coming back to life again, who, when it's time to break away with the crowd and sprint, they can sprint. Now if the other horse kind of keeps up with them, they still know that they can out sprint the other guy. But if they get caught or whatnot, like Justin Thomas, he went to that playoff and won the first playoff. I mean, I just think that it's watching the Kentucky Derby is absolutely astounding, because usually, with the exception of every once in a blue moon, the top pick doesn't finish in the top 3.
And Rich, you are the guy, the animal that handles that herd dynamic, as Kerry refers to it in the horse racing parlance. You are that person or that animal, or you're not. And we out on something about really the corollary to a golf tournament. You can lose a tournament on Thursday. You can't win a tournament on Thursday. Okay. And Kerry would spit that out in a horse racing sense. If you go out 45 seconds for a half mile, you're losing the race. Okay. Enjoy that lead that you have at the half mile point. That's way too fast for a mile and a quarter. So whether or not you can compartmentalize your inner drive, and whether or not you're in jive with the jockey and the dynamic of the crowd and the 20 horses, I think,
and the other 19 horses around you, where you've got to, you can't always control. It's kind of like, I would look at that, if I had to try and associate it, would be like, would be going out the first 36 holes and you get a bad draw with the winds or the rains or, anything like that, which happens all the time on the PGA Tour. So if you get out there and you get stuck like on the inside rail surrounded by 4 horses that are, you just can't get around or past or through or whatnot. I mean, like, how do you break out of that to get out there? Sometimes, you just got external forces going against you. But I mean, when you let these guys, get on the outside just a little bit and give them space to run, man, there's a lot of correlation, I think, between the best golfers in the world and the guys that are just chasing back.
He's been a big fan of this podcast for whatever reason since the get-go. Kerry has been. It's the second time he's been on. Front page article about him in the Wall Street Journal. This is the kind of guy we're talking about. Folks, if you know anything about American racing, the best horses are in Dubai and in Qatar, and some would say in Japan now. Kerry's the number one consultant on the bloodstock line of consulting for all these people. I believe in him. I do. I just think Americans are a little weirded out about this kind of conversation because it does tend to carry a little bit of a palm reader kind of feel to it. And I totally understand that because I'm sensitive to that. That how could this guy know horses can't talk?
Hey, listen, if you want to know anything about how to bet the horses, you just got to go watch the movie with Richard Dreyfuss, Let It Ride.
Yes.
And that's the only way that you can bet on horse racing. I mean, listen, I don't know anything about horse racing, Andy. I still will watch all, I'll certainly watch Kentucky Derby. And, if I'm not busy, working a tournament, then I'll certainly watch, the Preakness and, what's the third one?
The Belmont.
Belmont.
Yeah.
Because I find horse racing to be absolutely fascinating, but, for me, I show up to the place, I have a couple of beers. Hey, I like that guy's name. So I'm bet that way.
Yeah.
I'm in it for the fun more than anything else, but the handicapping stuff, I think that's pretty fascinating because listen, you can get down to the nuts and bolts of a lot of things. I mean, look at what's happened on the PGA Tour. More guys are coming in and telling guys how to play the golf course the most effective possible way, assuming everything's kind of going your direction. You're going to have some bumps in the road here and there, but I mean, listen, they'll try and tell you this is where you're going to be most effective. Your best shots are in between 130 and 110 yards. So try and get it into that section the most times you can because you're lights out from that yardage. I mean, it's just the strangest stuff you can come up with stats wise, but there's a lot of statisticians that work on the PGA Tour for a lot of top players.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the numbers here on our end. Rich has just been incredible. We haven't seen him since the RBC.
Yeah.
The RBC showed up with, and then in our head-on game, Fleetwood, Lowry, Tom Hoagie. I responded with Taylor Pendrith, Joe Highsmith, Cameron Young. We know where this is going, folks. Let's just get to the numbers. Right now, Rich has accumulated, this is just 2 tournaments, $5,658,000. Let me repeat that. Obviously, you've benefited, but you deserve it. You had Rory in the Masters. Whatever. If he finished second, it was still going to be a big spread in numbers there. So Rich is at $5,658,000, and I am at $228,000. Rich is leading me by $5,430,000. Rich, my Apple computer or my Apple calculator almost didn't go that high. I'm being that serious. It was like getting me like a little.
Oh, I know. Like,
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's too funny. Yeah, I mean the Rory victory certainly helped out, but again, I said this before. I don't do any research, or if I do, I look for one thing, like birdie. The ability to make a lot of birdies. Or if it's a tight golf course, finding fairways off the tee, things like that. I look at one specific thing, not the whole body of work, because I think there's other things, that do it. But I want to know what their strongest point of their game is. And that's kind of what I'm like, okay, I'm going to lean on that a little bit. And then, of course, you got to go to world rankings and things like that. Have they performed a little bit? But for me, more than anything else, Andy, it's a gut feeling. I mean, like I looked at the players about 30 minutes before we went on, and knowing full well this golf course is completely saturated. It's been raining cats and dogs all morning long. I would imagine that probably had close to 2 inches here today.
Wow.
And so this golf course is going to it's going to be mutter. Going to be a mutter golf course.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Beemer, I played today. I wanted to ask you a couple questions before we get on to our picks.
Yep.
So when you go out and play, just with normal people, Joes like me, music or non-music, is that cool to play music in the car?
I love music. Absolutely.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. I can't, I wouldn't, because again, you're going out there and you're going to spend 4.5 hours with somebody because you're going to be waiting. It's going to probably be more than 4 hours. And even if it's only 4 hours, it's like, writing with something, has some conversation, but a song comes on and that takes back a memory or something like that. I think there'd be a lot more conversations when you have music, because invariably a song will spark a something that happened years ago, or you went and saw this band in this arena or whatnot. So I love it. I love music on the golf course, and I'll listen to almost anything. I don't really care.
Are you an Alan Jackson, George Strait guy, or are you more of I'll
say-
in the Stones guy?
No, I'm more country, but I'll listen to anything. The only stuff that I don't like is listen on there is gangster rap. I used to play golf with some guys that play gangster rap on there, and I'm like, I'm okay with some of it, but I just don't want to hear, all the F bombs and stuff like that all the time when I'm out there playing. There's time and place for all that, but I'm more just, straight straight country and western than some, kind of classic rock like Def Leppard, Van Halen, U2, type stuff. But I'll do yacht rock. I'll do kind of anything because I think they all kind of serve their purpose when you're out there playing. So it's like when I do my speaker on the golf course, Andy, I probably will play, a couple of different genres at least in the 18 holes.
Interesting. So, Beem, do you like a cigar or a cocktail or both?
I like cocktails. I'm not a big cigar guy. Because I don't like the taste of it. But if anybody else wants to smoke a cigar, I'm happy to smell it. I like the smell of cigars. I just can't stand the taste of them. Okay. So, but yeah, having a cocktail out there is never a bad idea. Just kind of, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, like it's not every day or every time I go play golf. But I mean, I'd say, 70%, 75% of the time I'm out there playing. I'm just out there for fun these days anyways. So there'll be a cocktail involved. Yeah.
All right. Before we go into our picks, let me give you a couple situationals just for our listeners. I know people, I want you to tell me what I did right or what I did wrong. Okay. Right. This is unrehearsed. I am 187 out, staring over a bridge and water, and the hole is right behind that. I am in a very light rough. I think on tour they call that the intermediate. So it's not really the rough. It's not really the fairway. Do I lay up or do I go for it?
My question would be,
I'm a 12 handicap.
And what would you hit under normal circumstances, 185 yards?
5 hybrid.
Okay. I don't think you should lay up. I mean, what other hybrids do you have? Well, I'd have to see your game too. Do you hit it low? Do you hit it high? I would imagine 12 handicap, you probably carry a lot of hybrids because you don't hit it very high.
Right.
I mean, if the line's okay, then take a 4 hybrid out and just, make sure you swing at it because you always want to take one extra club, especially going over water, over a bridge and things like that. But, depending, there's, a number of different factors, I think to answer that. But I listen, if you can easily hit it 195 yards with your 4 hybrid, I said hit the 4 hybrid.
I hit 5 hybrid. I cleared the water. I put it over into a doable rough in 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I blew the chip onto the green and I 2-putted. I mean, blew it meaning I chipped on and I gave myself 20 feet for the putt, which is not, so that was,
it's fair to say. I'm thinking if you're hitting over water for your second shot from 180 yards, you're probably playing a handicap hole that's probably less than 7.
Right.
So you're supposed to make bogey on that hole if you're 12 handicap.
No,
you made par. You made par essentially.
That's true. Second situation, I'll give you last situation, is later on in the round, par 3. Let's just say it's 149.
Right.
Do you like a full swinging 8 or a choke down 7?
Where's the pin?
Playing up.
It's on the front of the green?
Yes.
What's short of the green? What danger is short of the green?
2 pop bunkers on either side. I know that's a tweener.
Well, I mean, I would always say, it again, all of it's situational, but I'd rather see an aggressive swing with the 8-iron, but you have to be aware that when you try and hit it harder, you usually pull it to the left, or if you miss it, it's going to flail out to the right-hand side. I'd probably hit the 8-iron, if I was in between them, if I knew I could get it there with a solid shot. But if the pin was in the back of the green at the same number, then, I might try and choke a little 7-iron and go that direction with it. Because I don't want to hit a hard club to a back pin necessarily.
I went choke down and I just missed getting on the green. And there was a difficult 2-putt that I got out of there with the par.
Gotcha. Yeah. I just, again, without kind of saying some of the stuff, Andy, it's kind of situational, but I would rather, when the pin's all the way back, just chip something back there. Instead of trying to muscle anything, because the more you try and hit it super hard. But I mean, if it's a comfortable 8-iron to hit at 149, you got to do that, But if you have to really muscle it, then yeah, the 7-iron would be the play. But again, it's kind of got to see it to get a better feel for it. But I would say the 8-iron would probably have been your better
Beaver,
guy.
do you know the scene down here that well? Do you know the Tampa St. Pete Clearwater golf scene that well, or not?
I know it a little bit. I wouldn't say I know it very well. No, I've been there for the tournament in Innisbrook for many years back in the 2000s.
The Valspar.
The Valspar, and then let's see, trying to think if there's any other places that I've really played around there. Played a couple of golf courses, but nothing super memorable.
All right, so give me your thoughts as we talk about this upcoming event. Obviously, the rain is a storyline. What do you know at this point? Your numbers are terrific, but what do you know in your brain about this season on tour? That where I'm going with that is Scotty having a great year or not? Okay, now people, of course, will say, "Oh, look at him, he's finishing top 10," but I'm using that in context of last year where he's winning. So you get where I'm going. How does Scotty, is this a good year for him or is this a step back?
Well, so here's the thing. There's only been one player in history that has followed up a mammoth year with another mammoth year, and that's Tiger Woods. I still think there's a lot of time for Scotty to go out there and to start winning. I think this would be a fantastic opportunity for him this week. But I mean, there's a lot of time left, Andy. So right now it's an okay year from his standards. I think it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not great. It's good-ish. But I think that even he would be disappointed with some of the results and some of the shots that he hit, because he probably wouldn't have hit those shots last year or didn't hit those shots last year. Just has missed a few things. Wasn't When I followed him at the Heritage, he was off in a couple of places, and you could tell that he was getting pretty agitated. Hitting a tree with a second shot. When it wasn't. I'm not going to say that it was super easy, but I mean it wasn't nearly as hard as what he kind of made it. But I still look at his body of work, and I still think he's going to win multiple tournaments this year. I think that he'll be contending in one of the last 3 majors without hesitation. And it just kind of remains to be seen. But listen, the guy's he's all world, so it's just been an okay year so far for him.
One of my favorite guys is Xander, and I thought he had a great Masters, but there's something in me that's worried about him. And I don't know if it's me or if I don't have the golf IQ, but there's just something in me. And again, I know last year was a monster, so maybe it's that. Now, all this stuff is in a horse racing kind of state of mind, that he did have a monster year. He had a breakout year last year. He's good this year. He's not great.
Well, I think he said it when he came back, and he said, "Listen, I'm a guy that likes to play golf. I like to play golf a lot. And when you take the clubs out of my hands," this is going back, I think it's to a rib injury that he got when he was working out, and that set him back. You're talking about a guy that probably gets out there every day and does something golf wise. If he takes a day off, a week from doing something, I'd be a little surprised. But he's just a guy that is always out there. He's grinding, working on his game, loves to work on his game. And I think that having, to take a timeout when he didn't want to, when he was just ramping up his year, getting excited about taking, what he did last year, building on it. He played the tournament champions and then didn't play again until, what was it, Bay Hill, I think, which is probably one of the hardest golf courses you can come back to. Well, Bay Hill and Players back to back. Now you're kind of playing the hardest tournaments back to back, and you're going to have limited results with it. It's not going to be great, but still, he's made every cut. Even the ones in the signature events. And so I think that's something that he can build on. And that sounds funny, him being a 2-time major champion last year. But again, you're talking about a guy who took, he took a pretty big step back this year by having to sit out, 5 or 6 tournaments that he normally would have played in. And I think that hurt him. I think he's going to get back to business here shortly. He's just an exceptional player. And I've got no reservations about him taking a step backwards and not winning this year. I mean, the guy's too good. He's too talented.
Is it me when I watch it week in and week out that in my heart, I feel like the Europeans are getting better and we're staying
status quo the same and they're kind of catching us a little bit. It just feels that way to me that they're getting tougher.
Oh, I think they've always been tough, Andy. I think that, they're just kind of having their run right now. But the Europeans have been very good. I mean, Sepp Straka, I think, has gotten so much better in the last couple of seasons, and his confidence continues to build each and every week. Shane Lowry is literally just absorbing everything that Rory is doing. Tommy Fleetwood is an eyelash away from winning his first PGA Tour event, and then probably numbers 2, 3, 4, 5 are going to be short, not too far behind. So yeah, I mean, I think the Europeans right now are riding a high, and they're building off each success because that's what they've always historically done. They've always historically built off of each other. They feed off each other because they're such a close community when it comes to playing on the road. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen these guys go out to dinner together. They play practice rounds together. They hang out, and the families hang out together. They get houses together on the road, and so it's just the same camaraderie they would have over in Europe. They're just bringing it to the U.S. And so I think that with each passing year, this is, these guys they're awfully good, and we're going to have our hands full in the Ryder Cup. But as a true American, though, I say, you know what? Go ahead, win them all now. Peak early. This September, we're going to own your ass.
But I think about the guest that's coming on after you today, Rich, Kerry Thomas, and he talks about the competitive edge and things like that. To the Europeans, I don't think they view the competitive edge the way we do as Americans. Meaning, the Americans, besides the Rat Pack of Spieth and Fowler and that group that are Justin Thomas that are all buddies, I call them the Rat Pack. There is no Rat Pack in the American game. It's very competitive. You don't go out to dinner, from what I know on tour, with your frenemies. That's kind of the gig in America. Same way in business. So it just kind of is that deal. In Europe, they do go out with their frenemies. They don't really view them as frenemies. They view them as friends. So is that true?
Yeah, of course it is. It's always been true. I think that's one thing that we've been criticized for at the U.S. side when it comes to Ryder Cup is the simple fact that we don't have the bonds that they do. They have a rallying point for the European side when it comes to Ryder Cups. That's Seve Ballesteros, and they have his logo on there, and they've adhered to that for the last 3 or 4 Ryder Cups. The U.S. side, we don't have anything quite like that. We don't have rallying because we dominated for so long, and now, and here's the interesting part about what you're saying too, though, is that Tiger Woods, when he came on the tour, he destroyed whatever friendships guys were having because the sports psychologist came and said, listen, guys, if you want to beat this guy, you can't be hanging out with people that you might like to hang out with while you're at home or on the road. They're not your friend. You're trying to beat them as much as anything else. It's gotten better, though. I know that Patrick Reed and Xander Schauffele, previously mentioned, they're best pals. They go out to dinner all the time, and Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth do it. I played golf the other day with a guy named Grayson Sigg, and this is just 4th year on tour, and he's sharing a house with a couple of buddies of his from home, and so I think it's still there. We just don't have the body of guys that go out. I mean, very rarely will you see more than 2, maybe 3 couples go out to dinner, where sometimes you can go and see 5 or 6 players on the European side go to dinner together. So,
what do you make of it? Which side? I mean, you cover it for Sky Sports and stuff. You really know that you're.
I don't think I put a whole lot of stock in any of it. I think that when it comes to normal tournaments, when it comes, it's cultural because there for a long time, and even today when you're playing in Europe, I mean, almost everybody stays in the same hotel. There's like a tournament hotel, most everybody stays in it. You get done playing, you get back. Sometimes there's, you even have courtesy cars. You hop into a bus with everybody else, you go back to the hotel, you shower, change, go downstairs to the bar, you see everybody, then break off in little factions and go out to dinner, with fellow pension members, whatnot. But I think in the U.S., you get your own courtesy car, you can disappear as easily as you can, go and join someone for dinner. I mean, it's that simple. I don't put a whole lot of stock into it because I think it's 2 different ways of doing it. I probably would have liked the European culture a little bit more, but there's plenty of times where I sit in the hotel room by myself at night, and I'm content as can be. I don't need to go out every night. I don't need to go sit there and have dinner with the same folks, day in and day out. I mean, even working for Sky, I don't go out to dinner with the guys every single night. Sometimes you just you need a break from everybody and everything. So I think it's a personal preference on all of it, and whatever works for you, whatever you're comfortable with off the golf course, because I think inside the ropes, everybody's got that killer instinct. It's just, what do you want to do off the golf course? You want to hang out with a bunch of people? Are you an introvert or are you an extrovert?
How did it work for you when you played? Did you, you talked about it. I thought about this, Rich, maybe on the last time we chatted, and you talked about how there was this rift between that DeChambeau was making, or criticism of Rory not speaking to him during the round at the Masters, and how, just crazy that kind of was. And it is crazy.
Well, it is crazy.
It is crazy. And it made me think about it. It's been a while since a couple weeks I've talked to you. What is the code? What is the etiquette? I think you mentioned that you talked to Mark Brooks or someone. What was the deal? Or
I don't think there is a code, to be fair, Andy. I think that it's got to be organic, I guess would be the greatest word for it. It's got to just fester itself. You can't sit there when you're in the heat of battle and be walking down a fairway and thinking to yourself, boy, I wonder if this guy's got any pets. Should I go ask him? What's his favorite? Does he like dogs, or does he like cats? How does he like
straight or Alan Jackson?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, listen, in the middle of the heat, I don't give two shits less. I could care less what this guy's doing.
And it's almost inappropriate.
It's exactly right. Now, granted, if there's something to talk about, if there's something to chat about, that's fantastic. And if there's not, I'm okay with it. Like, I'm not out there looking for friends. I'm looking to whip your ass.
Yeah.
So I don't think that, for Bryson, the way that he approached that,
it was immature.
He was totally, in the 24 hours that it took for him to walk off the 18th green on Saturday night, and was going by and high-fiving all the fans and this and that and really cheering everybody up. 24 hours later, he stands in front of a microphone and somebody asks him about Rory. Well, I don't know. He didn't talk to me. Like, I would never expected him to talk to you. I didn't understand that logic, and it bummed me out, because he's done such a great job of kind of letting people into his world. But I mean, in the same breath, though, it's just like he was mad because he couldn't control the narrative. He wanted to be out in front. He wanted to do this. He wanted to do that. And Rory wasn't having any of it. I mean, listen, you don't have to, as Lee Trevino used to say, listen, you don't have to talk to me. You just have to listen, and if Bryson wanted to talk, he could have talked all day. He didn't have to wait for Rory. He could have started talking to Rory, but I never saw that happen either. So I don't know. It was just a very strange thing that he came up with.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
all right, Beem, let's bring this. You the floor is yours. You've made me a little nervous about the conditions out there, and I'll be interested to know who you like. Let's go 3 picks. And
okay,
like I said, Beemer's up a cool $5 million.
I mean, so okay, now this is where it's going to become interesting, because listen, I would almost take a group that's going to go play Thursday and Friday together. I'd almost take those guys versus the field. And that sounds very strange.
No, I love that kind of thinking. Okay.
But I mean, because I think that these guys are, it's Scheffler, Siwoo Kim, and Jordan Spieth. I mean,
just how do you threesome that path?
How do you, listen, and I've got a couple other guys. I think Sung J M makes a lot of birdies. And I'm even going to throw out the name that I threw out earlier, Grayson Sig. I watched this kid shoot the easiest 66 I've ever seen. And I've been in the position before where I saw a kid shoot 60, another guy on tour, shoot 64 one day. And I said, I don't know how come you haven't been in the winner's circle yet. You got all the game in the world. And 4 weeks later, JJ Spawn goes out and wins. So, an off name I would look at this week would be Grayson Sig. From what I saw, it looks like he's in a good space. But I just look at that 3-ball and I'm like going, how do I get past those guys and pick, another name? And again, there's no disrespect to the rest of the guys in the field, but Jordan Spieth has been playing awfully well the last 3 weeks he's played out. He's in his home event. Siwoo Kim makes his home here. He's a Korean. He's got a massive Korean following here in town. and of course, number one in the world. I mean, like, this is just that 3 ball. Just like when I saw that yesterday, I'm kind of going, how do you stay away from all those? Now, again, though, but if we're going to stick away, like I know some people have like category 1, 2, and 3. You can only pick one guy from each category. That's different. But if we're just picking player to player,
No, we're just picking player to player. I mean, that's your prerogative. I have my response to what you just said, and
yeah,
Beemer. A couple things is, first off, we started this thing by talking about the conditions. That throws a monkey wrench into the chalkier guys like Scheffler, and whomever else. First off, by making
it's gonna be ball in hand at least for the first. I think if they do ball in hand the first day, I think they have to do it the second day too, but I could be wrong on that. But they're gonna play lift, clean, and place at least tomorrow, and it'll probably be the first 2 days, and it could go all the way to 4 days. That's the reality of it. So
okay,
Spieth wouldn't be under those circumstances. Spieth wouldn't be one of my picks, but again, I think he's been playing so well as of late. He's hard to stay away from.
Give me your 3 again.
I'm going to pick those 3. I'm going to pick that 3 ball. Scheffler, Spieth, and Siwoo Kim.
Okay, so there's a concept called reverse line movement. Money comes in one way, line goes back the other way. And I've found 3 guys that reflect the reverse line movement theory this weekend. Here we go.
Okay.
Ben An versus Sung Jae. The line opens Sung Jae minus 120 over Ben An. The line then stays minus 120 after it was released. All of a sudden, at one place, bet 305, it goes to Ben An minus 30, Sung Jae plus 109. That's the only place on earth where that occurs. Let me repeat that. Open minus 120 on him, stayed minus 120, and if for whatever reason, somebody who knows somebody knows somebody, Ben An goes to minus 130 over Sung Jae. That's called reverse line movement.
Okay.
You do the homework, you'll see that's the only book in the world that I was able to come up with that reflected that kind of sharp action. That means that somebody other than the sponsor and his parents like Ben An this weekend. Okay? Somebody other than the sponsor and his parents like Ben An over Sung Jae.
Okay.
And all that hints to me is he's live. Selection number 2.
Yep.
Steve Yeager. Same story. He was paired off against Mackenzie Hughes. Is paired off against Mackenzie Hughes. Mackenzie Hughes opens up minus 125 head on against Steve Yeager. It stays 125. And then the same book, that 305.
When did it change? I'm interested. When did it change?
I don't have the timestamp of when it changed. I just
Like, because Yeager he's a good driver of the golf ball. Hits it long, hits it fairly straight. Again, soft conditions.
and that's reflected. But Rich, it should be reflected across every single book across the entire world. It shouldn't just
maybe
be
that would. Yeah, maybe somebody hacked that site, or they were on a bender last weekend or something. I don't know, baby.
I hear it. Well, I'm going to give you one more on that same thinking.
Yep.
Jake Knapp. Now, a lot of this might be reflective of what you're talking about, which is the wet conditions, lift and play, all that kind of stuff. But it should be across the market. It shouldn't just be one book. I'm sorry. So he's paired off against Jacob Bridgman. Bridgman opens up minus 135. Bridgman goes up to minus 146. In one book, a book called Buckeye, goes the other way on Jake Knapp. Again, that means that somebody other than his wife, his sponsor, and his grandparents like Jake Knapp this weekend. And that's enough for me, Rich. That's sharp money. You can again, this is going to dovetail perfectly into Kerry Thomas and her dynamics. There's some guys that want to get it on in the mud. There's other guys that don't want to get on the mud. Those numbers should be reflected across the entire market. They shouldn't just be at one book. That's really suspicious. Oh, by the way, for my concluding comments, 2 of those 3 that I cited are at the same book. Bet 305.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's interesting how Bet 305 is adjusting to specifically Ben On and specifically Steve Yeager.
Now,
What do you
this is all said.
Rich? I mean, do you
No, listen. This is we're gonna end it on this here because you are obviously somebody who pays attention to all of that. I quit sports gambling. I don't even know how many years ago, just because I didn't find it fun anymore. And so what is going to happen when your three horses get absolutely run over by my three horses? Are you going to be able to look at a sports book ever again and trust anybody? Or you're just going to trust old Uncle Beemer when I just sit there and just get, just gallop right over you?
I love here's the thing, Rich. Do you discount what I just said about the reverse?
I don't discount anything. I don't discount anything that you're saying. I am so fascinated by how you look at things. I played with golf with a guy last year who is like you. This guy, but he's more a savant. Like, he told me a couple of things. I could probably call him up and he'd probably he'd probably say your guys are better than mine. I just, he had the ability to look at certain things, but his mind works unbelievably well. And I was very fascinated by it. But again, I look at stuff and I'm looking at the players, and I'm granted I'm looking at names, but I'm thinking to myself, this is comfortable for them. It's a home game for all three of these guys. They've played with each other a lot. They are going to lift each other. I think over the first 36 holes, these guys have an advantage over the field because they are comfortable with each other. Now, if you put three guys out there that didn't necessarily like each other, I'm going to go a completely different way. But I'm looking at these guys saying they're comfortable. They play quite a bit together, same hometown. They're familiar. I think they're going to drag each other to, across the finish line on Thursday and Friday. I think they're all going to play very well Thursday, Friday, and then we'll have to see how it shakes out on the weekend.
Right. And the one thing, in the interest of transparency, the one thing that I did have to state is that you and I are talking almost two different languages.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Those numbers that I gave are head-on matchups against Bridger, against Sung Jae-im.
Sure. And you're picking guys that have been faded. You're picking guys that have gone from one end of the spectrum to another one. So obviously this guy who's gone the opposite direction, there's something there in his favor.
Correct.
Yep.
That's where I'm going with it.
Yep. I like it. All right. We'll do this again the next 2 weeks. We'll do it in Philadelphia for the Truist, and then we'll do the PGA Championship. And good luck.
This is good.
Good look at your horse racing too.
And if you had looked at the DRF at the card, I'd hit you up for a Derby pick right now. But you said
I'm not a guy. Listen, again, I think the greatest horse racing movie of all time is the only one out there that I know, and Let It Ride with Richard Dreyfuss. Go watch that. And that's exactly how it should be done. Walk into a bar and ask everybody who they like and scratch them off. And the last guy standing, that's the one you take.
I love it. Okay, folks. So please stay tuned. After the break, we come back with Kerry Thomas. Rich, we will see you for the next tournament.
You have that, buddy.
Great seeing you.
This episode of Taking It to the Streets is brought to you by Wrightwood Medical, the leader in used and refurbished medical equipment. Wrightwood specializes in ultrasound equipment, but can also be your vendor of choice when sourcing lower cost alternatives for your operating room suites, scanning the entire medical spectrum. From single physician offices to larger hospitals, Wrightwood is the lower cost solution for your everyday medical equipment needs, and all of Wrightwood's equipment comes with warranty. You can reach Wrightwood directly at www.wrightwoodmedical.com. That is with a W, WRIGHTWOOD medical, or 773-848-7100. Again, 773-848-7100. If it's used medical equipment, it's Wrightwood Medical.
Welcome back to Taking It to the Streets. It's Andy Goldman, and our old buddy Kerry Thomas, the horse whisperer, has dropped in on us. You know why, folks. We love horse racing. We break it down every single year, and there's no one better to do it with than this gentleman. Kerry, welcome back to Take It to the Streets, boss. It was a great time having you on last year. I want to kind of talk to you about that a little bit. But first off, where have you been the last year since we last saw you?
Josh, a lot of things have happened in the last year. So yeah, it is Derby season again. So we're pretty excited about that. But big news is I got married last June after the Derby.
Congratulations.
If I got married. So my wife Daphne and I, and we have, I think we've had the new website last year, but we've made a lot of updates at kerrymthomas.com and that's been going on. Been actually pretty excited to share that I'm now the special advisor to Transylvania University Equestrian Program in Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, which is pretty exciting, helping their eventing team. And I'm getting ready to go down, leaving tomorrow actually, for Derby weekend. I'm going to be the presenting speaker and helping coach for the United States Eventing Association's Intercollegiate and Interscholastic Championship. And I'm pretty excited by that. It's a great opportunity, and to be heading down to Aiken, South Carolina to participate in that and help the student athletes. And of course, it's on Derby weekend, so everything is coming to a head pretty, in kind of a condensed fashion. But happy to be here, my man. Happy to see you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk briefly about last year, because we haven't talked horse racing at all. It pained me a couple of weeks ago to see Just a Touch, who I had at last year's Derby winning it. He dead last year in the Derby, lost the race by 52 3/4 lengths. And he romped, I think, his first try as a 4-year-old by 10 lengths. It was at Keeneland. It was against Skinner. It was a nice race. There was nothing wrong with that race he just looked like the horse I was gonna get at Derby Day. That's Just a Touch. Now, my question is, obviously I'm not crying my horse didn't win. I'm saying the slop last year was such a huge issue. There's no words you can use to describe. Just a Touch didn't want to run in the slop.
You know what, the environment, it just goes to the point of fact that, from the herd structure, from the horse's psychological perspective, the environment, and including the human environment, the influences that we have, plays such a significant role on performance. I always remind folks, whether it's handicapping or my private clients in whatever discipline I'm working in, that performance is driven by emotion. And the horse is not a machine, as that we know that the horse is not a machine. If the horse were a machine, if it was a race car, it'd be a lot easier game to pick, right? But with horses, you get the car and the driver, so you have to accommodate for both of those things, or allow for both of those things, and study both of those things together, really. And the environment can change a lot, and just the totality of Derby Day can affect horses differently, And you got to remember that we're talking about a herd wired animal. And when you isolate that, that herd nature from the herd environment, you're isolating their strengths and their vulnerabilities. So anything can be exposed, and anything can trigger that. So, and hey, you can have a bad day, as simple as that.
Well, you liked Fierceness last year. He didn't really like the slop either. So he turned out to be a great horse, goes on to, I believe, win the Travers. Kerry, that class from last year, I think, is going to be one of the great classes we've ever known. They think about that class. Dornoch, there's Dornoch, Forever Young, Sierra Leone, Just a Touch, Mystic Dan, Domestic Product. Did their Fierceness, is it, who's the Princess Theodora or Princess Anna or Theodora? She's part of that class.
A lot of really great horses. And the thing about when you get to the grade 1 level, especially when you're talking about the Kentucky Derby, it's kind of like the Breeders' Cup Classic, where you get, the best of the best. That we're getting the best 3-year-olds, coming into the Kentucky Derby. And, from a competitive standpoint, there's so many layers to that the horses, you're often splitting hairs. When I'm giving a hierarchy, a breakdown of the horses, and I'm going through, and this year I did it a little bit differently with a brand new product, which I'm really happy about. But when I'm splitting, basically you're splitting hairs. When I'm looking at things, you have to realize that there might be 10 horses that, from a herd dynamic standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, are like this close. And so, but you have to have an order, there has to be a 1 through 20, basically. So how do you break that down, and the only way to break that down is to do a cross comparison of the little nuances. And basically, it's almost conjecture of, well, how this horse handled environmental changes that we don't know. It's conjecture because you don't know the exact environment of race day, at post time, and how horses are going to handle different things. But and the thing of it is too, that's just one race. We're looking at the Derby as that one particular race that we're interested in that moment. But for horses, it is just another performance along their trail. So, how they perform in different races. I'm looking at the body of performance when I'm evaluating horses. I'm looking at the body of their performance. I'm looking at the entire aggregate and not just individual races. And so that's why, a horse may perform not to what we thought in the Derby, but then go on and have a great career. It depends on where they are on their psychological growth pattern. I mean, these at 3 years old are still developing, by and large, developing psychologies, developing horses mentally, and who they were before, who they are in that moment is really just part of who they can be going forward. And so that's where we're, projecting out forward with all that when we're talking about the growth patterns. So it's very interesting to try to, dissect these horses of where they are in that moment and who is further along in their maturity and who is not quite as far along. We have some of that this year, as a matter of fact. It's, maybe
let's talk about that for a second. So are you more interested from a betting standpoint in a deeply developed psychological confirmation versus the traditional handicap tools that we use, like Bayer, speed figures, third off the layoff? Does he like slop? Does he not like slop? Doesn't look like it's going to be sloppy there this weekend. Where I'm going with that is, let's start throwing some real names out there. In my humble opinion, I read your wonderful write-up. Folks, if you want it, go to prisnet.com. You can download Kerry Thomas's, basically his entire, I do it every year. So way before he and I ever spoke, I was downloading. That's how I reached out to him in the first place. So it's a long read. It's laborious, but it's a great read if you're into horse racing. And it takes in all aspects of the psychological confirmation, mental confirmation, the maturity, different words like that you're going to have to understand while you read this. You're going to have to take that leap of faith when you're reading it to understand that it really is kind of like a horse whisperer kind of thing when you read it. Doesn't mean bet the life on it, but it just means this is where they are. So let me, after reading your write-up, here are some questions I may have. Sandman is the first one that stuck out to me on the mental psychological development. Here's a horse who's an older 3-year-old. So remember, folks, when this is for 3-year-olds only, the Kentucky Derby, and you're deemed in horse racing, very important point, you're deemed a 3-year-old on January 1st of every single year you've been alive. You're deemed 3 years old. So you want a horse, in theory, you can make this work, who was born January, February, March. That's an older 3-year-old than one that was born. If a horse was born July, August, that's a very, very green, immature 3-year-old. So most of the horses are January, February, March, just because that's usually how it works out. With that said, Sandman, he's going on his 9th start at the Derby. Okay. Multiple times around 2 turns. My gut is this is a very mature 3-year-old. Now, you wouldn't have known that the way he was lugging out green as could be while winning the Arkansas Derby. You would have never have known that. You take me from there specifically with Sandman, because he's someone that intrigues me.
Well, Sandman is an example of a horse that is, there's a thing with horses, like every horse has what I call a competitive duration. How many seconds of time can I maintain a high level of competitiveness? Like, high stress, high tension. How long can I sustain that? Some horses can sustain that for 30 seconds. Some horses can sustain that high level at 45 seconds. Some horses can only do it for 15 seconds before they need a mental break or before mental fatigue begins to set in. And there's a threshold. Every horse has a different threshold when it comes to that, just like people. How long can you stay in a pressure cooker and still perform at a high level before you need I got to have a breather before I go back into that? Can you do it in increments? Can you do it for a long period of time? Those kind of things. So that makes a difference. And horses are much the same way. That stress builds up. And Sandman is a prime example of a horse that has a boatload of physical talent. We know the family, right? He is a high rev, very, very advanced, what I call the individual dynamic, that athletic expression, but he is also has there's a cap on that. It's not endless, that amount of energy that you can sustain that and optimize mental and physical efficiency. That's the key. What we're looking at is, you have physical talent. Every horse can run the mile and a quarter, right? We can physically train a horse to run that distance as far as physical distance, but there's a difference between being able to compete at that distance and the increments in which you do compete. So if you look at the Arkansas Derby, that's a prime example of a horse pushing up against that threshold of time of sustained combat time, like that high pressure, right? And so he was running up against it. He was basically, his clock was ticking. And you'll see him get a little bit loose. He'll look green. It's not actually green. What it is, it's mental fatigue setting in, and the walls are starting to close in. He's been under that drive for a long period of time up to that point, and we're getting down to the end, and the clock has been ticking this whole time. And what needs to happen in those moments is that, first of all, the horse's physical needs to begin to outrun their mental stamina, which he was able to do there. Publisher was coming at him, but not really any kind of threat. And the jockey needs to, I always talk about, when I'm talking to my students, about be the bridge, not the block. You got to help a horse bridge those gaps when they need it. And so he needed, to be ridden in that moment of time for their jockey to be like, I'm going to keep you on, I'm going to keep those guardrails. And what happens is when a horse gets mentally fatigued, they get floaty. It's kind of like when you're driving in the fog, or you're tired, or you take your eyes off the road and you kind of swerve a little bit and you're like, oh, I got to wake back up, that kind of thing, and keep my direction. When mental fatigue sets in, you get a little bit floaty a lot of times. And that's not green. That's just a horse that has up against that mental fatigue threshold. And so and he is lucky at that point that the race wasn't any longer than what it was, that he didn't have somebody else coming up, up behind him, and that he had physical talent and the jockey fortitude to not let that get derailed. But it was very close to being derailed. It was about as close as you're going to get. And so there's a threshold there. So that does not mean that he can't compete at a mile and a quarter. We're adding distance now. It doesn't mean that. It means that you have to be strategic in the duration of time that you ask him to compete. You got to pick your spots, and you have to kind of manage your burn time. How much time am I going to ask him to burn real high, real fast to make up time, or to make up speed, or increase speed to make up distance. You got to kind of be more strategic, in that. So you have to know the rocket ship that you're riding.
So I got a couple questions for you. First, I want you to compare and contrast that to Burnham Square as well as Sovereignty, because I have those three right in a bucket, same kind of horses. They're going to all be looking at each other at the 3/4 pole. Those are the right horses, I think, that are going to be running next to each other. Second question is an age-old debate that I've had with my horse racing buddies for years and years. How much of the race is won or lost by the jockey? Is it more or less than 15%? How much is how much is the horse? How much is the jockey?
Well, the jockey, obviously, it goes without saying that a jockey has a lot of influence, which is why I put
how much? Is it more than 50%? If I put
so you asked me for a number. I never really thought about a percentage, but I would have to say that 25% can be jockey influence. A jockey can influence a horse 50% by going counterproductive or counterintuitive to the horse's instincts and the horse's natural tendencies. So it really is, there is no number across the board. It depends on the horse and the jockey, So if you have a rider who doesn't understand the fact that, hey, I have a horse that builds up momentum over time. He goes through his natural progressions to stalk the pace, and then he amps it up, he dials it up, he gets his sensory system functioning, his herd awareness, and then he's ready to punch it. And you have a rider who's like, oh, come on, I have to get this position, and I have to be up here, and I have to be there. So if you have two personalities that are counterproductive, it's like in business, you have a manager and a coworker or a worker that have two different ways of doing things. It can be counterproductive. It can be a lot of attrition. But if you have a jockey who works with their horse's natural tendencies, they can have a very positive influence. If they work against their natural tendencies, they can have a very negative influence. So the percentages, I can't really give you a percentage. I can tell you that a rider can be a strong advocate for or against, obviously not purposely, we hope not purposely, against the horse's natural tendencies and the way that they ride. Horses, however, are very accommodating. They will very often try to do as they're asked, even if it is not what's in their natural, competitive intellect, if you will.
So I guess the perfect example of that is really Mystic Dan, if I'm hearing you correctly. He doesn't win if Brian Hernandez is not on board last year. Brian Hernandez is worth more than 25% to the win for Mystic Dan last year at the Derby.
Yes, exactly. And that's something that, going back and looking at that last year's report, when I talk about what the horse needs, the human influence in that report, you can see, and it's archived on our website, last year's report. But I talk about how that horse needs to be ridden. What is it going to be the best way for this horse to be ridden? And Brian Hernandez and Kenny McPeak, they understood that better than anybody. They understood their horse better than anybody, obviously. And you're exactly right. That horse doesn't win that race without that rider. Without him on in the saddle. So he allowed Mystic Dan to optimize every bit of physical and mental talent that the horse had, and under those circumstances, under those conditions at that time. And it couldn't have been better done. I mean, it was really the perfect storm. And I was very happy because Kenny McPeak is such a great guy, really, really good person who I've known, as an acquaintance for many, many, many years. And I was really, really happy to see, I know him as a really good, patient horseman and a very thoughtful horseman. So I was very happy for him because humans can get into horses' way. And there was an example that they did not get in that horse's way, even under the horse's development. It didn't get impatient. And that has a lot to do with it, letting the horse be who they are and develop to their best ability to get the most out of that athlete. And that horse was well campaigned, and it came to fruition in the Derby to put a cap on that. So that's a good example of, yes, how the jockey allowed that horse to perform at that level.
Gary, why does this favorite journalism frighten me the way he does? Not to the bad. I mean, this is a horse that's never left Southern California. This is a horse that's, I believe, won 4 stakes races in 5 horse fields.
Yeah.
And the media collectively gushes over him and makes him like an unequivocal favorite. I don't know who raced in those races in Southern California. Yes, Rodriguez was there. Are we sure Rodriguez is that good of a horse? I mean, when you look at the race, I don't really know that Rodriguez is someone that I would consider, being flattered by. So
Right.
I'm really, really nervous about this horse. I think there's going to be some value. I think there's a lot of speed in this race because of Owen Almighty. Owen Almighty.
Almighty, yeah, right.
Horse from Tampa here, folks, where our show is taped. So horse got his name with John Hancock here at Tampa Bay Downs. And you take it from there, Kerry. This horse gives me the creeps. I am not liking what this guy's showing.
Well, from my perspective, the reason he's is where he is on my totem pole is because of, not because of his competition per se, but just because of the skill set that he has as an individual, and how he executes that, how he basically his efficiency within himself, the efficiency with which he conserves his emotional energy, with which he responds to his environment, coupled with physical talent. These are all very. I always like a horse that doesn't panic, that a horse that does not carry stress. Carrying stress forward, especially in a classic distance race, is very counterproductive. And he does not carry stress. He's able to. There's a lot of mental versatility there. And he has had a very normal and progressive growth pattern, and a very matter of fact. and no panic in the horse's expressions, and never really loses. He creates. There's something that a horse does, what I call the mental workspace. They create this cushion around them. Their awareness of their environment and where they are in that environment allows them to have a lot of movement within, of that workspace. They create that mental workspace. And horses that don't, they get bumpy. Their rhythm changes. They get very reactionary. And this horse does not. This horse responds purposely and does not react. So far, I haven't seen any reactions that were uncoverable. And from my own part,
those are 5-horse fields. He's going to get 20 horses 3 time zones over. That's inherent. You just like the psychological.
Because here's the thing: we see 20 horses, right? But you got to think about it in the context of a bachelor herd. These are colts, obviously, and so there is a bachelor herd in the natural dynamics that really kind of forms here. And horses, just because you have 20 horses in a field, or just because you have 30 horses out in the pasture, that is the herd that we see. But for the horses, they really just pick out a couple. I mean, you may have, so in that bachelor herd that we call the Kentucky Derby, that race, it's going to be broken down very quickly into little pods of herd. A couple horses here, these 3 horses kind of combine up, these horses, bind up, this kind of thing. So it's going to break apart very, very quickly. And so we may see 20 horses in the field, and there may be a lot of chaos. And yes, the horses need to be able to handle that. But from a peer standpoint, there's only so many peers within a certain group of horses, no matter how large it is. So he is not going to be psychologically affected by the mass majority of those horses that are in that field. They will basically go away, except for their physical presence. But from a herd structure presence, he's not going to have a whole lot to do with them. So it's going to be higher level horses like that are high functioning. They oftentimes only pair up with one other. They're only going to identify 1 or maybe 2 other peers in the crowd that separates them from a herd dynamic standpoint, that they'll see as peer competitors, those kind of things. Other people can get in their way, like, oh, if I can get to you, I'm going to get to you. You could have chaos in the playground and not be able to get to your fight. People holding you back, or things can happen that keeps you out of that fray, but you're not going to be mentally engaged with those other horses. So the fact that there's only 5 horse fields, it doesn't play a role in the herd combat. It plays a role, though, in the physical part of it, as far as the number of horses. So yes, when you increase the number, you do increase the potential for situational chaos that you can't control. But he's not going to be herd dynamically bound to those horses. So there is a physical thing to deal with, obviously, but mentally it doesn't change anything.
Give me the difference between, let's go back a second here, Burnham Square, Sovereignty, Sandman. I think, again, the 3 horses that I'm most intrigued with in this race, I wish I could trust this Burnham Square. I like that Wilkes just ran him at 59-1 in the workout, which tells me that they want to have him closer up. You don't run a horse 59-1 on Monday before the Derby if you're not interested in having him closer to the front.
Well, you're trying to, you want to tighten up those screws, but this is the thing. I'm always concerned about the duration of competitiveness. How much time do we have actually to be competitive? Because if we're going to tighten up those screws, and when you're in a sprint race, what you only need, so you can use a smaller condensed high rev burn because you don't have as much physical distance to cover. So you can burn, fast and furious for a shorter amount of time and be very successful. That same mentality then applied to a longer race. So now you have more physical distance, but you still have the same mental combat time that you're working with. So it doesn't mean it can't work. We've seen those types of mentalities work before. It has to be strategically placed within the body of the race, and you have to pick your spots. And you can't basically, you only have so much gas in that tank. So you have to plan your route accordingly, that, I'm going to put the throttle down from here to here to get to here. I'm going to back that off and do some, energy conservation, and I'm going to burn it again when I need to. You really have to be strategic. And horses that have shorter, high rev burn times, that duration of what I call competitive focus, they can still win mile and a quarter races, but they're not going to win mile and a quarter races by trying to burn their full 30 seconds that they have available in a 120-second race demand. You have to work, and you have to build in cruising speed and cruising time into that, and it can be on the threshold of getting ready to go into your hammer down, but you don't want to use that up too soon, and you have to time it just right. So it really comes down to, again, we're talking about the jockey's influence. It comes down, especially in classic races, these types of horses really need a strategic and thoughtful ride from the jockey to be successful.
So I don't want
I
don't want to tie you down with this. I don't want to tie you down real quick because I want people to go out and get your write-up, which is on brisnet.com. You can get the Kerry Thomas write-up.
Handicap, and yeah,
correct, and get it on Brisnet. But let's just speak in 10,000 foot. Give me a lot, a horse that intrigues you, a horse that doesn't intrigue you, kind of thing.
A horse that really intrigues me out of the entire field, a horse that really intrigues me the most, and you'll see that if you get a chance to read his details in the write-up, is Grande. That's a horse that really intrigues me more than any other horse in this field for multiple reasons. The lightly raced thing, all those different things, but there's a lot of a substance to this horse that could go either way, depending on what version of that psychology we get, and you can dissect the details of that in his write-up. As far as intrigue, though, that is the most intriguing. I mean, I love them all. I love all horses, but if you're asking me for kind of the horse that sticks in my mind that I haven't been able to forget about for multiple reasons, is that horse, and so I would not forget that horse.
I mean, let's talk about him for a second, because I read your write-up. I'm glad you mentioned him. I didn't want to mention it for you. Grande is the one that just jumps off the write-up because we don't know that horse. He's raced 3 times. He's a Pletcher horse. I don't know whether to be unimpressed or impressed with the wood.
That's just it.
Because he was wide on both turns, and there's Rodriguez on the rail. It's not comparable, the race those two ran. It's incredible that he finished second. That's his third start. He is green. His confirmation. I mean, correct. I mean, it's only his third start.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. He is young on the time in combat. And it reminds me of a youthful kid that has a boatload of talent that is still learning how to be serious. And so we'll see. But there's a lot there, and as his future, in my opinion, is very, very bright. But where he'll end up on Derby Day could is you can conjecture high or low, but his write-up is the most important to me, I think, because the lightly raced, there's a lot of little nuances to him that have really intrigued me quite a bit. And other horses that don't intrigue me as much. I mean, there's a lot of horses that will be, in my opinion, that are also ran type of horses. But that's typical of the Derby. I mean, in any kind of competition, there's always going to be those ones that just, it's not your day. You don't really, quote unquote, belong here. This kind of things. They all belong there. Don't get me wrong, but you know what I'm saying. As far as competitiveness, you're still looking at 5-6 horses in any race, or depending on where you are. But there's that top upper echelon that are obvious competitors, and the other ones can surprise you, and that certainly has happened more often, more times than we can count in racing history. But it doesn't mean I don't like those horses. Oftentimes people say, "How come you didn't like my horse?" Well, I liked your horse, just not particularly in this field, in this crowd, in this race. There's some horses that could make some noise. There's some horses that, Flying Millhawk is an example. You got a horse that's has not been running on dirt, who is, of course, you have Jason Worth as part of that ownership and 2-8 Racing. And so he's going to get a lot of attention that way. And a lot of eyes on him. It's a fine horse, but horses fit where they fit kind of thing. And not to say that, again, you go back to any given Sunday or any given Saturday, anybody could win. We've seen that. But the way I look at this, any particular race that I'm evaluating is what horses, how many times out of 10 will this horse be likely to finish in this place against this crowd? And that's how I look at it. Yes, and every horse can be beaten, 1 out of 10 times. If that's the case, even the best horse can be beaten. But how many times out of 10 is the likelihood of these horses finishing where they're going to finish? And that's what I look at. That's how I look at the field. And but again, you're splitting hairs at different tiers. And if you go, this year I did a herd dynamic competitive hierarchy, which is something brand new I'm really excited about. So I was able to give a breakdown and from a bachelor herd structure from a competitive standpoint of the followers, the leaders, things, the horses who have that inherent nature, and then compare that to them as racehorses.
Right. Kerry, I wish you all the best. Hopefully we'll go up again on the Triple Crown Trail and we could do this again and compare notes. I'm somewhere thinking about Sovereignty, somewhere thinking about Burnham Square, somewhere thinking about Sandman. I like the guts of Sandman. I really do. I like his Southwest, which was prior to his Arkansas, where he absolutely did a somersault out of the gate. And somehow, some way, he's flying down the lane. The cynics will say there was nobody at the Southwest. The people that like Sandman will say it took a lot of guts to make a bid like that when he was totally gone and spotted the field 10 lengths at the start.
Well, the horse has undeniable grit and heart. I mean, you can't, that's just, you're looking at.
He reminds me of Ripoli's horse, I Want Revenge, who never made it to the Derby and had that wood where he had that horrible start and he still won it. That's who Sandman reminds me of. I think Sandman might be the best horse here. I really do.
You may be right. We'll find out coming up soon, and for me, like when I'm evaluating horses, I don't necessarily key on just one race. I compartmentalize the different parts of the horses, athletic and aptitude. And I look at their body of work to identify the characteristics of who they are in performance, not just, I don't break down individual performances and look for, well, he did good in this race and bad in this race. I look for across the board, what is consistent, what is not consistent, because races is like a grid. You can have a little bit of this, across that grid of individual performances. I'm looking at the whole performance capacity of that individual. And so, yes, I do obviously consider the nuances that happen in individual races, but I'm looking for the consistency across the board, the consistent strengths that continue to emerge in different scenarios, and the consistency in their vulnerabilities too that they have to overcome across those scenarios. And so, when I'm watching, like when I'm studying a horse, I don't just like watch one race. I look for parts of this race. I go to the next race, look for the same parts. I'm actually studying, if a horse has 5 races, I study all 5 races looking for one thing at a time. And I go back and start over again, look for something else across those 5 races. And I'm looking for, again, what is consistent, what is not, because I want the total picture of that performance capacity. I want to know who that horse is. I want to understand the operating system running that machine.
Yep.
And that tells us who that horse is. And this information is key because now you take that information and it's, you cross compare that. If you're a numbers person and you want the physical analytics, which is certainly important, I'm not going to say that. You pair that. You pair,
and you look for value. And you look for value.
Yes. I'm offering the extra piece of the puzzle that says, let's identify the operating system running this machine. Let's identify what characteristics and tendencies this horse has as an individual to actually optimize physical talent. There's a psychological aptitude and then there's physical talent. And so where do these two, how far away are these two from each other? And then how much physical talent are we going to rely on? Some horses have to physically outrun their mental inefficiencies, just like people. They got to physically outplay their mental aptitude. And those horses are going to be reliant upon the jockey, because if you have a horse that has a century system that's not really efficient at speed, cannot clear enough space for themselves, they're going to need help. They're either going to latch on to another horse. If I'm going through the crowd and I don't know where, something is, I'm just going to follow you. And I'm going to keep pace with you. And now I feel comfortable because I'm a herd animal.
Right.
Or can I be independent of that? And how long can I be independent of that before the jockey needs to help me and steer me and be purposeful? I mean, those kind of things. So, and then, cross comparing that with the numbers and the physical data, to me, that gives you a complete picture. So my goal is to provide the complete picture of who that horse is as an individual, as an athlete, and to give you information that goes along with all your other physical data that says, okay, we have this, and this is what's happening. Where's the jockey come in? What type of jockey? And it gives you a complete picture. If you're going to do intelligent wagering, then you should do intelligent wagering.
Along with the workouts. Following
Exactly,
Mike Welsh, who does great stuff with the workouts.
Yep. It's a big jigsaw puzzle, and my goal is to offer a very, integral part of that jigsaw puzzle, so that you have some extra tools in which to put into your arsenal, so that you have something else to consider, because it can make a difference. And really, when push comes to shove, ultimately performance is driven by emotion. Simple as that.
Got it. Kerry Thomas, you can get Kerry's work, his write-up on brisnet.com. You want it. It's an incredible write-up this year. I love it. I like the changes you've made from year to year. I like how it's not stagnant, how you do make adjustments. I think that's great, Kerry, because I'm
always trying to learn. That's the name of it. I'm always trying to learn and push the envelope, and
I love it. I think it's great. We will see you. We'll catch up with you, Kerry, on the Triple Crown Show. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks a lot, Andy. We'll see you.
Goodbye from St. Pete. And remember, folks, you're only as good as your last trade. So never too high, never too low, till we meet again.